Good morning, everyone, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. 2025 is the year that housing has reached the highest point on the EU agenda. It is also the year that residential construction across the EU has reached its low in 10 years. Building permits across the EU are at historic lows, not because demand is waning, far from it. It's because the cost of building is too high. The cost of building new homes has skyrocketed by 56% in a decade, reaching even more than double in some parts of Europe. Materials, supply chains, energy, labor, all are pushing the prices up faster than inflation. So on the one hand, we have the costs of building that are climbing, keep climbing. On the other hand, productivity in the sector remains low. We know that construction is the only major sector of the economy, both in Europe and in the US, that has a negative growth, productivity growth on average. 1 in 4 workers needs upscaling or rescaling. The sector needs support to attract and retain skilled workers, to scale innovation, and to meet the urgent demand for affordable and sustainable homes. But there is good news. There is a way to increase productivity and lower the costs. It is possible to build smarter, to build more efficient, to build cheaper, and to build faster. Through innovation in construction, we can unlock affordability, boost industrial capacity, and transform the whole construction sector. Now, the question is, how can the EU help to drive this transformation? How can the EU help build change? That is the topic of our conference today. So to explore this in depth, I'm honored and delighted to welcome on stage 4 leading voices on housing from the European level. So please welcome Irene Tinagli, Chair of the European Parliament Special Committee on the Housing Crisis, Matthew Baldwin, Chair of the Commission's Housing Task Force, Barbara Bonvissuto, Director for Construction of DG Growth, European Commission, and Sorcha Edwards, Secretary General of Housing Europe. Please welcome. Thank you all for being here, and we are very grateful that you could take the time in these intense weeks and that you could travel from afar, from Brussels, for being here. It is a pivotal moment, we know, at EU level. Just last week, the European and national leaders discussed affordable housing for the first time at the European Council. We know that ministers are preparing council conclusions. In the European Parliament, you're preparing recommendations, and of course, in the Commission, you are advancing the work towards the first ever affordable housing plan for Europe. So a lot is in the making, sort of, so let's dive right into the topic of our conference. How can we support from the EU level innovation so that we can address and overcome the housing crisis? So we go first to you, Irene. Let's begin by looking at the Parliament. So how do you see innovation in your discussions in the European Parliament? We know you've organized very well a series of events, of study visits, of public hearings with experts. Can you share with us some key insights from those discussions?
Well, of course, we, as a political house, we don't go into too many technical details, but for sure, one thing that has emerged is what you just said earlier, is that the construction sector is a sector that lacks a little bit in innovation, and that we could benefit so much from an innovation that allow us to build and renovate with lower resources, so in a cheaper way, in a more efficient way. We are also dealing with the challenge of climate neutrality. We know that about 40% of all emissions come from housing stocks, and we know that we will have to renovate that. How can we do that in an affordable way, in a way that does not pushes the prices and people out of their homes? So all of this cannot be done alone, or just trying to pump as much money as possible at current level of efficiency and technology. We need innovation. We need new technologies. So I think this is a very important thing. Then, of course, if I may add, it's not just innovation in materials, in construction, in technologies. I think we need an innovation in the way we organize the market, or so-called market. We need innovation in the way we finance. We need innovation in the way we involve the civil society, in the way we create cooperation between the public and private sector, because there is something that has gone deeply wrong out there. And we need to rectify, we need to correct that, and we cannot do that without a deep innovation in how we do things, not just in materials, but in how we involve all the actors in the supply chain.
Excellent. That is brilliant, because innovation goes much deeper than just materials. So thank you so much. Matthew, we go to you. You're the head of the first ever Commission's Housing Task Force. Can you give us an overview of where the work stands with the plan that is to be announced soon?
Well, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. I joked with you when I came in. I feel like I'm a bit on holiday today, away from the working on the plan in Brussels. It's great to be here in Barcelona too, to remind ourselves, picking up what Irene was just saying, that innovation is at the heart of how cities work. Cities are the innovators. Just walking over this morning with Jordi, you know, you run into your constituencies, you innovate constantly through your interface with citizens. And that's why I think your point about that broader sense of innovation is so important, and why it's good for us to get out of our ivory towers in Brussels to come and see how things are working. We're doing well, thank you, Bianca. We are accelerating our work, as we know. We are anticipating having a little longer to produce our plan. But I think what underlies it, and you said it very well at the start, you know, the highest level of attention now, I think we've reached the high point in terms of political attention, the European Council downwards. But at the same time, you know, we're at a low point as something is going on out there, and we need really to move fast. So we're advancing with the plan. We will be out before the end of the year. We will come with a short, I hope a crisp, I hope a readable, a relevant document, focusing on the principal issues which we've been talking about in every forum across Brussels and Europe-wide, issues relating to supply, issues relating to investment, issues relating to reform, and also never forgetting those who are most affected by the crisis, whether it's the young people or whether it's homeless and so forth. But I also hope, and again, I should stress, this is a political level discussion. I could come with a fantastic plan we could all today, but it's the politicians who will decide. I hope we come with something which is strong on how we work together and how we work. Sitting here with Irene, I think the Parliament and the Commission have shown we can work super well together to fantastic series of reforms, exposing the issues. We work with all the different institutions. We've got to work vertically much better. We've got to work better with the member states. The member states need to work better between themselves. With the cities, we can't do this without the cities. I really do pay tribute to the work that you have done in the Mayors for Housing, and of course Mar and the Mayors for Housing group born here in Barcelona, to really push these issues to the forefront. So those are the highlights I'd like really to stress. But the other point is that even in our little ivory tower in Brussels, we are driven by public response. We did a call for evidence. We got 300 detailed expert views, which have been very useful in forming it. And as we entered the closing stages and we looked at our public consultation, we had more than 13,000 responses, including more than 10,000 from citizens. So it's a hot issue. We have to tackle it. We have to tackle it quickly. We have to tackle it seriously. We have to tackle it well.
Yes, thank you. You have a lot to consider in a short time. And now we know that housing construction is also a dedicated strategy that will be part of the package to be announced in December. So let's zoom a little bit into that with you, Barbara. Could you share with us what are the objectives of this dedicated strategy for the sector, and what can we expect in terms of new initiatives, new instruments, anything new to the current toolbox we have for the sector?
Thank you. Good morning. As Matthew said, it's a very topical moment for all of us right now. Working hardly on the definition of this strategy, we are looking at the overall issue in a holistic way, and obviously each actor has his role to play. and you cannot address the housing crisis without a strong, healthy and competitive construction ecosystem. So that's this is the reason why we're coming with this strategy. We have already heard the productivity in the sector has been very sluggish. I mean, we have, I think, a decrease in productivity of 8% since 2019. This is also a sector which is the least digitalized among all industrial sectors. In order to bridge this gap between demand and supply, we need to make the construction sector more productive. And obviously, innovation is one of the key. Exploiting the full potential of the single market is another important dimension. So what we are looking at with our strategy, we are looking at all the factors which are leading to increase of cost, and we are looking at the barriers within the single market. We are now working around 4 pillars. One pillar is about the input. Input have been more and more costly. If you take, for example, the material, you look at materials, the cost of materials has increased enormously. We are looking among the different measures at the unlocking the potential for secondary raw materials. The market for secondary raw materials is still not working. There are too many obstacles in terms of the underlying standards, in terms of the regulation of member states, in terms of lack of digitalization of pre-demolition audits, for example. So this is one of the areas we are looking at. Then obviously innovation. Innovation means boosting both supply and demand for innovative products and innovative construction techniques. Then we are looking at simplification and digitalization, simplification of the administrative procedures. This is, if you look at permitting procedure, for example, but not only. Our stakeholders complain about the timing, about still paper-based documentation, all the unpredictability, lack of transparency. So we have to make sure that these procedures are streamlined. And the last building block we are looking at, it's skills and services. The single market for the provision of construction services is not yet there. There are still many obstacles when we look at mobility of workers, recognition of professional qualifications. So we have already announced in the single market strategy, we will come up with a Construction Services Act by the end of next year. And then we will also take actions on skills, including skills mapping, having a clear understanding what skills are needed at the Horizon 2030, and then working together with academics, with university research on creating skills curricula, harmonized curricula, etc. So these are, I'm not going to say more because otherwise I will spoil the surprise of the 16th of December when you will see the strategy. But it's a lot about implementation and acceleration of the tools that we already have, but we are also thinking of new tools, for example, this construction services.
Excellent. We are looking forward to the surprise. So now going to the Housing Europe, Sorcha. You have been a leading voice from Housing Europe to push for more decent and affordable housing for all. So how do you see the role of innovation? How can innovation in construction contribute to affordability and go hand in hand also with sustainability? Because Irene did mention that that's also an angle. We have to make sure affordability does not compete with sustainability. They have to go together. How do you see that?
Yes, thanks a lot, Bianca. Indeed, this is one of the big challenges. But first of all, I think with this plan, what we've heard already about the EIB's new facility on innovation, I think you've really hit the mark. So we've up to 80% in some of our member states where we have a strong public housing providers, up to 80% is already modular construction. In other countries, we have up to maybe more on the pilot side, and other countries just starting off. But we clearly see, so procurement, training of engineers, simplifying of contracts, and obviously the finance side, trying to simplify, also reduce VAT is something that was pointed out. So we can see that this new facility is really addressing some of the issues that we're hearing from members who are really trying to push on this, finding new ways to deliver, let's say, faster, maintaining the high quality and bringing down the price, because this is what their mission is locally. I think what will be really crucial is the governance side of things, and I think this is where we can really see where Barcelona is leading the way here, because in the last years, to a decade, I would say, you have been really leading, first of all, pointing out also at European level, this is a real social emergency, but at the same time, leading on the governance side. So building up the local capacity to innovate, whether that is building up the capacity of the public provision, but also bringing in new actors, having an established framework for bringing in housing cooperatives as well, new models of housing cooperatives, and limited profit providers. So we can see that if you're building that capacity at local level, we see the results already in Barcelona. So I think it's exciting to be here in this city for that reason, because you're really pushing things, and this framework partnership with the EIB, I think, will only improve. But yeah, I would stress this, and I think it resonates with what has been said by my colleagues here, that it's not only about technical innovation, but it's about how we do things and getting the finance into the right targets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about getting it right for the right people and at the right time. And Irene, I see that you were nodding, so these governance elements and building capacity probably resonates with the work you're doing currently in the House Committee. You are still in the preliminary phases of your recommendations, but work is progressing. So building on these past months of work, what can you share with us in terms of actions needed at EU level to address the shortage of supply and all the related issues? What can you share from the House Committee?
This is a big thing. We're still working on it. So we have our first draft of the report out, but we have 1,500 amendments that have been tabled and that will be discussed in the upcoming weeks. So this gives you an idea of how many contributions, perspectives, issues that there are to be taken into account when we talk about affordable housing. One thing that we have tried to explore is really how to rebalance in terms of governance, how to find a better balance between all the actors that are at play in this supply chain, how to find the right and a new and better role for the public sector to guide also the private initiative and to support the public initiative, because this is what has happened, and we've seen it in many countries in the European Union in the past decades. I mean, housing, like a century ago, was part of the idea of a welfare state, a social economy in terms of social market economy that we wanted to build in Europe. And in most countries, it was about building a healthcare system, education system, housing system that would allow people to grow and prosper. Then what happened around the 80s and the 90s, that everybody thought, well, now we are all very rich, we are very wealthy, maybe housing is something that people can do by themselves and we can let the market fix it and deal with it. And you know what? We realized that it was not always like that. I mean, market does the market, tries to maximize profits, and that's what it does, and it does it very well when there are the options to make profit. The problem is that when we have to balance the supply and demand and the profit maximization function, to balance that with the needs of people, the needs of a community, the need to create a common good that supports the life of people, but also the economic life of communities, because now we have cities where you have companies that cannot find workers because they cannot afford to live there. So we need to bring back housing into our concept of welfare. And so we need a new role for the public sector at all levels, for public policy. I think we need a public policy that takes into account housing that has to be done at all levels. The point here, how to strike the right balance and who does what. And this is the kind of governance, and this is what we need to rediscuss. What is and can be done at the European level, what at the national level, what at the regional level, but nothing can be achieved if we don't cooperate and work together. And I really appreciate, the initiative of the Alliance of the Mayors for Housing, because they brings this into the core of the debate and say, look, we are here. We are the ones that are dealing with this problem and with the citizens every day. And some years ago, you decided that was our problem, but this is everybody's problem. So we need to work together. And I think, and I would like the European Union to start thinking in terms of how can we help cities, because we know that this is a problem that affects mostly cities. So what are the programs that we can better tailor to support mayors and local administrators, and what kind of tools we can put in place? It could be partly financial tools or loans or financial institutions that can be used. It could be some forms of regulation to make sure that the market goes in the right direction. So it could be many different tools, but that's what we need to do in terms of redesigning a governance that puts housing back at the core of public policy.
Excellent. Governance is really one of the key words, and the role of cities is definitely so important. And going back to you, Matthew, I'm sure that governance and the role of cities has come up high in your record number of inputs from the public consultation. You mentioned 13,000, and of which 10,000 from citizens. So how is the Commission taking this further in terms of analyzing the inputs, but also continuing to engage with cities, with citizens that contributed? How do you see that evolving also in terms of governance?
No, I very much agree with everything Irene has said, and I'll try to be brief because I'm in the very similar lines. I mean, it shows there's a huge interest out there. I mean, often when you do these consultation exercises in the Commission, unless you get a campaign from one organization or a group of organizations, you don't get anything like that level of response. And I think, and this is the dichotomy, housing is and will remain the responsibility of member states and cities and regions, and the Commission is not wanting to jump in and say, right, listen up everyone, we're going to take care of everything here. But how can we therefore find that European added value to this debate and bring that discussion and start to address this huge grassroots level of concerns? And I think part of the answer is to keep it going. We've called 2025 the year of consultation. The affordable housing dialogues is a phrase we've coined, and I think it's been a very successful year in that sense. But we need to continue. We need to develop a framework where we can bring everyone together, to use your phrase, the stakeholders, the cities, the regions, of course the member states, and at different levels. We will have next year an informal housing ministerial hosted by Cyprus. We're also going to have a summit. So we go from the European Council, a good and brief discussion there between leaders, to a full summit. And we must take advantage of this. Leaders are doing this not because they have nothing else to do, they have many other challenges, but this has risen to that level, and we've got to use this momentum to create lasting structures for good cooperation to address these issues. So we're still toying with the ideas. Again, it's not that the Commission's going to come with a sort of superstructure and impose it on everybody. We want something that works and is useful and sustained to help us address these issues. And I'm sure we're going to talk about investment and finance later, but that will be, I think, a key part of our ongoing discussions with the EIB, of course, as a crucial partner in that.
Yes, exactly. So we'll get back to the financing in a moment, but before that, I want to go back to the construction sector. Barbara, we know that off-site and prefabricated materials are very important part of the strategy. So common standards are needed for that to be able to reach scale. So currently, what are the barriers to be able to do standardized off-site construction, and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, well, offsite has huge potential. The growth potential is estimated by 2040 at 30%. It has also huge potential in terms of cost saving, around 20%, and timing. From 20 to 60%. Yesterday we were at this site visit, and that was, that indeed the timing dimension was really key, especially as an enabler for affordable social housing. Now, this is where, and linking to what Matthew said, where we see EU added value, because there are currently several barriers for the uptake of off-site construction. Standards, lack of standards, regulatory barriers, financing, and skills. And this is where the EU can usefully help. Standards. So first of all, we need to have standards. So we have the new construction product regulation. We will launch standardization requests, and we aim to fast-track standards for innovative construction materials and construction techniques, and off-site is one of those. Then regulatory barriers. We still have national building codes who are not allowing for off-site techniques, or also public procurement that are not allowing for that. So this is something that we need to push the member state to work on. And what a better incentive than giving them money. So the idea is that we will announce next month a new tool at EU level, which is called Competitiveness Coordination Tool, which would in principle bring together EU and national money, but upon conditionality, so that they should be accompanied with reforms. And we are hoping to have a pilot for off-site construction. So the idea is that money can be, because we really need a big investment up front. So the idea is that money will be available through EU funds, and here also I'm very happy of the announcement of recent announcement of EIB with respect to the lending facility for innovation in construction, national funds, but upon condition that the member states engage in a process of reform and then get rid of all the obstacles, regulatory and others, with respect to the uptake of off-site construction. And then we will also be working on skills. The advantage of off-site construction is that indeed it may make this ecosystem more attractive for young people. It's a different way of working, but then they also need to be trained for that.
Excellent. A lot is in the making. So. Also with the competitiveness coordination tool, this looks quite promising. We'll have to see, because I understand it's voluntary basis, so it's for uptake by the member states.
Yeah. So we need to trigger the interest of the member state. We have already seen a few member states interested in that, but once we have the green light to launch it, then we will organize discussion with member states.
Excellent. So now going to the ground to see in Housing Europe, you've just launched the State of Housing in the EU report, and you also have case studies with examples from several countries. So do you have any good practices around innovative new ways in which public housing providers are working, also maybe with procurement processes or so?
Yes, indeed. We launched just last week the State of Housing. We produce every 2 years based on the feedback from the different federations of public, social and cooperative housing providers. And I think in your introductory remarks, you actually brought up some of the tough situation on the ground. We are about 20% off target in most member states. So we're still feeling the impact of the geopolitical situation over the last years. However, at least the State of Housing did show that in many countries we're still delivering in a counter-cyclical way. So we are delivering without adding to speculation up to 30%, even up to 50%. We have the feedback from Ireland, from the limited profit and public sector. So the messages were, let's say, worrying in a way because of these delays that we can't seem to get over because of the cost of capital, the cost of construction, and the of land, the cost of land.
Cost of
It's a
land,
big
okay.
issue as well. Then on the innovation side, it's obviously a sector that has tough targets to meet, and faced with these high prices, we've seen some amazing innovation coming through. What comes to mind, indeed, on the procurement side, so delivering, let's say in Sweden, they have up to 30% higher construction costs a decade ago to the EU average. So we have seen a concerted effort to work on procurement. So they, let's say, prepare pre-set models, which they know are going to be approved in every region of Sweden. And this has actually meant that it was the only country who met their target in 2024. So we see that innovation in procurement is working, let's say, and it's coming from the public housing providers there. In the Netherlands, they've also worked on something called Energiesprong. So this is, I think you've all heard about the, in 10 days, you have a part off-site prefabricated solution to work on an entire street and bring down, say, energy consumption almost to net zero, integrating renewables. Unfortunately, we're still seeing that the price has not come down over the last decade there. However, crucial, I think this is one of the crucial things we have to get our head around, and as part of this strategy is why has the cost not come down for those prefabricated solutions? We see it across the board, so to different extents. Indeed, up to 80% in some member states is already modular. In other countries, Flanders, excellent pilots coming through from the public sector, but not yet up to the scaling phase because of the fragmentation, because of a lack of skills at different levels. And so excellent examples there, but definitely more work to be done. Skills on the procurement side, also crucial. I think that's probably what we should keep in mind, that if we want, obviously we're all here because of the social emergency, that is the price of housing, whether that's rent or home ownership at the user level. So we have to make sure that if we are now publicly financing, publicly boosting innovation, we have to make sure that those boosts to innovation actually are reflected in the cost for the end user. I think this will be the challenge as well, because increases in efficiency don't necessarily translate to decreases in cost for the end user. So this is where we have to be quite strategic in how we roll this plan out. So indeed.
This is really interesting what you're saying, that already there is a lot of prefabricated and offsite going on, and you mentioned Sweden and Netherlands as examples, but still the cost is high. There is not reduction. Perhaps the cost of financing, which we just announced our lending envelope of 400 million. So maybe that's an area where we can help, and there's other areas. So I'm going to Matthew now, because we can discuss also how the Commission can work with financial institutions like the EIB, like national promotional banks, to unlock innovation in construction.
Yeah, no, again, I think this is a great opportunity for me to thank everyone on your side, the extraordinary efforts that the EIB's made on housing, from the top down, from the President, Vice President we've heard from as well. And it's really been an honor and privilege to work with the entire management team in EIB to think through these issues. And you're leading from the front with your plan. You're leading from the front again today with this new lending facility. It's exactly what we need to be doing. To drive money, to encourage. It's a clever way of driving grassroots interest, actually, to come with new and creative ideas to stimulate innovation. I think more generally what this signals is that we need a big collective effort from the finance community to get after the housing problem. We know I don't think we do know exactly how big the investment gap is. We're going to have some numbers in our plan, and we're still working on those. But what is very clear is we've got to blend together public and private resources. And the EIB, with its sort of long-term investment perspective, is a natural player for that. We've got to involve everyone in this. It's got to be a really inclusive effort, and I think we very much agree on this. We need the national, the regional promotional banks. We need the EBRD. We need the Council of Europe Development Bank, which does so much already on social housing. And that's what we're trying to pull together in this thing we call the Pan-European Investment Platform, which is, maybe in Brussels we too often come up with grand sounding titles for things. That's the Pan-European Investment Platform. But this thing really does have to be a difference maker over time. So we've been taking a lot of time to think it through. And I think the idea is that we pull together a single framework which really tries to strategically support investment in social housing, in affordable housing, sustainable housing. If my boss was here, he'd be reminding me, Matthew, you've got to stress it's about affordable, sustainable, and decent quality housing. And that's, I think, again, is very much what you're after in the EIB. We've got to bring in the beneficiaries from this. They have often trouble navigating between EU and national as well as private financing routes and channels. Ensure we're bringing in the best of the best practices, promoting policy learning between the different institutions and policymakers. So we're going to have, I think, as part of this, we're fine-tuning the details, an ongoing, it sounds very boring, but a working group looking at the best of the ways in which we develop financial instruments. You've done some great work in the EIB on this just recently with my colleagues in DG Regio, bringing the investor community in, all the stakeholders, Housing Europe. You've got to find a place in the Pan-European Investment Platform as well, and how we can support the social housing sector, the cooperatives, all the different elements, and last but not least, of course, civil society. Again, and back to the previous remarks I made, it's not about changing the competences. It's still going to be for member states and cities and regions, but this platform, I think, can be a really crucial tool to help them develop stronger plans to tackle the housing crisis.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing what we can for now. And indeed, we need to have all the players working together, joining forces. And I think also that's what you're trying in the Parliament, to really bring all the levels of the government, but also all the players together. And more than that, you've gone to the field with the study visits in Barcelona, here in Vienna, in Milan, to really look at how different housing models, financing models there are across Europe. So even after all, we are getting at the end of the year, 1 year of House Committee with all your work. Can you share with us what is needed to scale up the models, the local models that you've seen that work on the ground?
As I said, we need more cooperation at the level, starting from the European level. And the European level can be very helpful. Of course, we know that there are competences and things that will remain, that are in the hands of the national and local governments, but what the European Union can do, many of the things that we mentioned, like standardization, creation of financial instruments that can help to have the pan-European platform, and then provide room for scale up for local projects, communication among different actors, sharing best practices. That are all things that we are trying to do and that can be done and could be very, very helpful. Then, of course, if I may, of course, private capital is crucial, financial instruments are crucial, but we are entering the negotiations for the next multi-annual financial framework of the European Union. And everybody keeps saying that housing is one of the European Union's priority. I think we should be a little bit consequential, from what we say and what we do. I think I've said enough.
I see that the audience agrees, and we'll give the chance to the audience in a minute. Just to give the chance to Barbara and to Sorcha to also think a bit beyond the offsite, which we discussed, and the procurement. Are there other elements, for example, permitting? Could we make it easier, faster, so that in that way we can also accelerate the construction? What else could we support from the EU level?
Well, for sure, there's a need to streamline and simplifying administrative procedures. This add cost to our construction stakeholders, and permitting is probably the big thing. Now, the question is what can be done. This is quite tricky. What can be done at EU level? What can be done at national level? There are several layers of authorities involved, national, regional, local. I think from the EU side, what we are thinking of is, first of all, to have a clear understanding of the situation, mapping and monitoring. We are launching a study to look at what is the level level of digitalization. We know it's very varied among member states. Certain member states are much advanced, others less. What is what are the average timing of the procedures? So we already need to have that understanding, and then monitoring means also creating transparency, and transparency is often an encouragement then to do better. Then how we want to support those member states in their efforts towards digitalization is by providing the standards. Providing the standards, but also the instruments for interoperability among the different standards. If you link the digital building permits with the digital building logbooks, or with the building information modeling, then you really can create economies of scale. You can have accuracy. You can have better mapping, and then making life easier for companies who do not have to re-enter their resubmit their documentation for different procedures. Then, eventually and also supporting with the exchange of best practices and financial support. We have a technical support instrument supporting digitalization of building permits at all levels. Then eventually we may, but this is a discussion we need to have with the member states, we may think of accelerating in terms of having mandatory or first starting with voluntary, then turning to mandatory targets in terms of both the level of digitalization and the timing. But again, this is quite a tricky discussion that we may want to have.
It's good to see where you'll arrive with the mandatory or voluntary, but it's good that it's on the table, yes. And Sorcha, how do you see that from the public housing providers, the issue with permitting, but also the issue with EU funding? How can we stimulate the uptake of innovation so that the costs are reduced and construction is faster?
I think we have to really take a lesson from the approach of Commissioner Jurgensen, as he spoke at the high-level meeting in Copenhagen. And he said, we can change the story of housing in Europe. And I really like that. And why he believed that was, it was after he visited a local project where a whole neighbour had been renovated, making sure we didn't produce gentrification, so maintaining affordability and inclusiveness, also looking at a geothermal, so having a sustainable long-term heating and cooling. So I think also the spirit of the new European Bauhaus, so basing on really what is working on the ground. And we have amazing examples. We have examples also of what you saw yesterday, those who went for the visit. Housing doesn't have to continue to be something that divides generations, that excludes people, that pollutes. We have amazing examples around Europe, and growing number of examples where housing is actually an inclusive force, intergenerational housing, including affordable housing within high tension zones. This is a big point of the initiative of Mayors for Housing. So I think we will make a mistake if we want to, let's say, reinvent an approach coming from European level. And this is where I really like how Matthew Baldwin says. We need to see what is the EU added value to support a multiplication of those type of projects that really include, that do not pollute, that push towards circularity as well. And then what is the signal we can give from EU level? Of course, it is limited, as you say, but finance has a big role to play. And we do have a clear signaling, so the intention to double the funds available in this round, and we are working with the local providers, public providers, to make this, where possible, make this actually happen. But indeed, all eyes are on the MFF, the next one, and the fact that, of course, yes, housing is one of the priorities, but we will be competing with many other priorities, and cities will, and local authorities will be competing with many other authorities. So we have to find a way. I know earmarking, I know this is not the most popular term, but to make an obligatory amount of finance go in, whether that is through blending with loans or direct subsidies, depending on the local context. I think we will have to push for an earmarking. Otherwise, we fear indeed that we won't be able to put our money where our mouth is with this plan. But of course, huge challenges, but it will be a crucial signal I think we have to make.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is a hot topic, of course, is the elephant in the room. Thank you for bringing that up. Now we give a chance to the audience in case there are points we haven't touched on in this panel. Does anyone have a question for the panelists? Yes, please. Introduce yourself, the organization, and the question.
Juan Alario. I'm specialized in climate change, and I have two questions. One is related to climate mitigation. A key piece of climate mitigation is heat pumps. The market is not expanding a fraction of what was expected. The expansion of the market will have led to innovation, cost reductions, learning by doing, but it's not happening because the market is not expanding. So the question is what the Commission, this is a EU issue, what the Commission plans to do in this area. The second question relates to climate adaptation. I noticed that you put a lot of focus on climate mitigation, but very little on climate adaptation in buildings. I think this is fundamental in my view, because otherwise you will have to retrofit the buildings with air conditioning, with flood protection later on, and will cost much more. So what do you plan to do in this area as well? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? I see one question there in the back. Yes. A microphone is coming. On your way.
Filippo, Plus Value. What are the actions to mobilize the private capital? Forgive me for challenging a bit the consensus, but here clearly there is an elephant in the room, which is the private sector, in particular private investors. Let me give you an example. Just one asset manager like Blackstone has committed $500 billion in real estate investments in Europe. I think that is the target. Clearly, these guys are not here for charity or for public purpose only. So how are you going to, or are you thinking, to provide the governance and regulation tools in order to channel this immense amount of money that could address the money issue? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other question? Okay, final question here in front. You want to take? No? No? No, no, no. Any other question? Okay, so we take these two questions, climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and the mobilization of private capital. So there was quite a specific topic on the heat pump and the market not expanding, what we can do there. Yes, on the Commission side. Yes, please.
Well, again, if my Commissioner were here, he'd be stressing our goal is affordable and sustainable and quality. And I think your questions get all of those three. And by the way, we don't believe these are incompatible goals. Sometimes they're talked about, as you know, you have to choose, and we don't buy that. Look, I'm not the main guy for energy efficiency and the support of that. But if you look at how the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive is set up, it is designed to do it in the most cost-effective way, whether it is through insulation measures, whether it's through climate mitigation measures such as heat pumps or other energy efficient and other renewables. So again, it's looking at that cost element and how we can stimulate the growth of those. Your point about adaptation is very well made. Again, I think this speaks to the quality piece. Unless we can deal with produce houses which are capable of supporting healthy homes for families in the future, we won't be beginning to achieve our goals. We've got to move in all of these fronts to deliver multiple policies. It's not a question of choice, is my simple point. In terms of the actions to mobilize private capital, your question is absolutely right. All of the public finance in the European Union would not be enough to tackle the investment gap. And indeed, our thinking behind setting up the Pan-European Investment Platform and working with the EIB and our other partners on this is indeed to try to stimulate, leverage capital in. I think the results are starting to show up. I was looking at a paper produced last week by the collection of national promotional banks, and they, just in 2024, are devoting 75 billion euros to support affordable housing. They're leveraging calculation multiplies that up to 400 billion. So we're starting to do things. But the key thing, as you say, is, and I'm not criticizing here, I wouldn't dare, Blackstone for having a profit motive, but they're not, what they're getting the most profit from is building luxury homes. They're not making profit from making affordable and social homes. We've got to find a way to support private capital, we were discussing it this morning, to come into supporting homes that people can afford. And that is one of the many elephants, I think, in this room.
Thank you so much. And now a final point, final message that you would like to share after all the discussion. We've looked at governance, that is very important. That's how we started with. The role of finance, of course, is key, as we see private sector also has a way to work. And of course, we have financial instruments in which we can blend public and private investments. And we've seen the role of common standards, permitting, the off-site construction, very important, circularity as well. So from all the discussion, what do you take home and what can we keep on working on? Let's start with Irene, please.
Well, you know, we start. When I started with the committee in the Parliament a year ago, most people, and even I, didn't have clear ideas. You know, it was this huge problem. How can we tackle that? You know, from which perspective, which actors? So 1 year later, I think all the work that we've done already give us some clear ideas of the things that could be done, should be done, how we could do them, what are the actors that could be involved, what kind of regulations, even in terms of how we can contain a little bit the speculative investments and trying to create more space for sustainable but not necessarily speculative kind of investments. We know what it needs to be done. We know that. Now we have to do it.
Yes, the
That's
time is
it.
for action and with urgency.
Yes.
Sorcha, please, your final words.
Yes, I would just stress again, we are not starting from a blank sheet. We have to build on what works, reinforce local governments, and local capacity, so also the small C in governments or the housing providers, and make sure we send the right signals when it comes to finance indeed. So that's again the MFF, but also we hear just from where I'm currently based in Brussels, the limits, of course, the debt limits. So even if they had the finance now, they wouldn't be able to spend it. This is the message that we are getting through. So they've been converting offices to apartments, which was originally destined for public social housing, but there was no capacity then to actually pay for it. So to really hear what are the financial issues on the ground, what is slowing down that production, and then I think on the finance side, yes, private finance, but also to look at the excellent examples of where we have managed for decades to steer private finance in the public interest with strong conditionality and a strong vision for a decent housing system, because it can be done. But I suppose the issue here is that we have different types of housing systems. Some public housing in Europe has relied on direct public investment. So there's also requirement of innovation there and how the public housing systems are financed, particularly in the Mediterranean region, because they are relying completely on public investment. And there are hundreds of thousands of people relying on that as well. So we have to be very careful, keep in mind that this is a real very jigsaw of a housing fabric, and again think how can we add that value coming from the EIB but also the European Commission in each context, thinking of the people, the end result for people. Thank you.
Yes, excellent. With you, Barbara, what do you take from our discussion?
Well, very much in line with what has been said. If we really want to boost innovation, we need a collective effort. We need to look together at supply and demand. Still often the ones who bring innovation on the market are not rewarded So we need, from the EU side, we can provide the regulation, the standards, but then from the national side, there should not be gold plating, adding regulatory barriers. There should be market uptake in the form of incentives through public procurement, for example. We really need to create the lead markets so that this price gap that can be for innovative products then can be compensated and demand can be sustained.
That's very well said. And final word goes to Matthew.
Short, because I spoke too long. Multiple drivers of this crisis. Sorcha likes to talk about the housing system, and she's dead right. And so we have to find multiple solutions. We should be aware of his simplistic answers. Innovation is going to be a crucial part of it. I think we've had a great discussion today, and thank you, Barbara, for unpacking so well our plans on the construction strategy. And then the last paradox, it's going to take a lot of time to get things right, to address things, but we have to act now. I think the idea of the European Union that says, housing's not a question for us, we are not interested, is just not going to function. And President von der Leyen got it absolutely right in July 2024 when she said, if this is an issue for Europeans, then it's an issue for Europe. And we have to work together to get after it.
Exactly, and we can change the story of housing. I like the words of Commissioner Jorgensen. What I take from the discussion is that we need to build on what works. Yes, there's a lot of building the capacity locally, but I like also what we discussed. It's not about innovating just in the materials, but it's the broader innovation. Innovate in how we engage, we bring all the actors together, also vertically, horizontally. Innovate in how we finance, how we remove the barriers to common standards. So we can look at innovation much broadly, and we can achieve that together. So thank you so much. Big round of applause. Thank you for being here and for the wonderful discussion.